Hey guys, Nate here from True Crime Cast. Look, have you ever wished that you could go back in time and see the events that shape the true crime cases that really just fascinate you? But with newspapers.com, it's like having a time machine into the past. Dive into more than 1 billion, that's right, billion with a B, newspaper pages from 1690 all the way up to 2025 and relive the headlines that shocked entire towns. Explore newspapers from the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and beyond with just a simple search. Read the breaking news as it happened. Crime scene reports, witness testimonies, courtroom drama, you name it. Explore forgotten clues and see how the media shaped the narrative of infamous cases. But it's not just the major stories. Newspapers.com lets you dig into local mysteries, missing persons reports, and small town scandals that history, unfortunately, forgot. It's the closest thing that you can get to being there when it all unfolded. So if you're ready to dig deeper into the crimes that keep you up at night, start your journey today at newspapers.com. Just use the code TrueCrimecast at checkout for 20% off. Untold stories are waiting in the archives.
Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.
This is True Crime Cast. I'm Jamie, joined by John. What up?
Not much, man. Not much at all. I say that. That's a lie. We've got a lot going on. We're about to head on vacation with, I say vacation. We're going to church camp with like 60 youth that we're chaperoning. So this might be our last episode.
Yeah, we'll see how big of a vacation that turns out to be. I am excited about it. It's going to be a lot though. And, don't worry, we are recording ahead, so there will be content at least the week we're gone.
Yep.
We'll see what happens when we get back.
No promises. We have a really good case for you today. It's a very interesting one. It's actually one that is the focus of a documentary on Netflix called A Deadly American Marriage. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you to Alexis. Alexis is our newest member over on Patreon. So Alexis and everyone else who has already joined that will get a bonus episode each and every month, and you get early ad-free content as well as time allows. So huge shout out to Alexis and everyone else in our Patreon family.
Yeah, we put a preview out for that episode on our main feed. So if folks are interested in getting a full Patreon episode, you can kind of get a taste of what that is. This one's about the Boston Marathon bombing, which was very interesting.
We record that episode. We start each Patreon episode with case updates, and we gave an update about the Crystal Rogers trial. I think after that posted, there was some more breaking news, so we'll continue to keep you updated over on Patreon, but a lot of big news out of Bardstown / Bowling Green last week. So yeah, you want to stay in the know on that, patreon.com.
Yep. Also want to give a big thank you to Charlize26, who submitted a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. Says, thank you for the clear and passionate reporting on the lives of victims of crime and the survivors, as well as the beasts that torment them. That's very poetic, Charlize. Thank you for the 5-star review.
Thank you so much. I did see a review came in that gave us just a few stars and mentioned an advertisement they weren't fond of. That one was for a firearm manufacturer, I think. We don't have any control over those kinds of ads. I think a lot of times it has to do with like the user's geolocation and algorithm. So if you get an ad that you're not particularly fond of, just know we didn't put it in your ears.
Yeah. Yeah, we if we could choose the ads that go in, they would mostly be about food because that's what we're about.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you want more evidence of that particular fact, you should check out our other show called Bless Their Hearts, where 90% of the conversation is about our fatness and dadness.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
All right, man. We have a crazy case today, and I'm excited to get your feedback as we go through this. So let's get the ball rolling.
Yeah, it's wild. And I think you're going to find a lot of varying opinions about this. And the documentary that really has been really popular is called A Deadly American Marriage. In case you can't figure it out, it's about somebody who dies and
we're married.
They are in a marriage, but the American piece is also interesting, and we'll get into that. And we're going to tell you everything about it. So if you go and watch it after this, you're going to get to see interviews with people. It's good stuff, but we're going to break it down and tell you what's going on kind of behind the scenes of the documentary. We're going to start out talking about Jason Corbett. He was from Limerick, Ireland, and he was a part of a big Irish family that used to spend their summers fishing in a neighboring county. It was a traditional Irish upbringing. Jason was really close to his sister Tracy, and Tracy describes her brother as a kind and caring soul, and Jason's going to be really one of the three main focal points of today's story.
Yeah, so Jason married his first wife, Margaret Maggs Fitzpatrick, when he was 27 years old. Everyone who knew that couple said they were just a very happy couple. They were obviously in love. Soon after they got married, they had a son named Jack, and then they also had a daughter shortly after Jack arrived. And Tracy said, I remember them saying that they had their family was complete. They had their little prince and princess. It all seemed to be going amazingly well until November of 2006. So one night, Mags woke up Jason to say that she was feeling wheezy. Jamie, I used to have asthma as a kid, and every now and then it will flare up. Wheezy is a feeling is it called an onomatopoeia, where you're like literally wheezing when you try to breathe?
It's the sound
it makes the sound of that. You can't breathe, and it's your lungs and esophagus feel just completely out of whack. And this was not out of the ordinary for her because she had been living with asthma for a long time. So Jason kind of was familiar with this. He set her up. He helped her take her nebulizer, but even that treatment wasn't working like normally. Mag's sister was there that night and watched Jason do everything he could to help her, but Mags passed away. At the time, Jason was 30 years old. They had a 2-year-old son and a 12-week-old daughter.
In the documentary and otherwise, you may hear claims that Mag's death was under suspicious circumstances, but as far as we can tell, that is not the case at all. With her sister being there, it seemed like everything is truthful that has come out. There is no question in anyone's mind that was close to Mags about what happened to her. So just want to get that out of the way. And Jason did his best for as long as he could. Raising kids is hard. I don't know how single parents do it. I know a lot of them, and they are rock stars. They're superhumans. And it took about 1.5 years for Jason to finally say, I need some help. So he placed an ad for an au pair, also known as a nanny. And in early 2008, he hired 25-year-old Molly Martens. Molly had grown up in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was recently out of a long-term relationship, and she had dropped out of Clemson University. She was looking to start over, and being an au pair overseas, spending some time in Europe sounded like a great next chapter for her life.
A longtime friend of Jason's named Lynn Shanahan said that she was there the day Molly arrived in Ireland. Lynn said that her first thoughts upon seeing Molly was something along the lines of, this is not what Jason needs right now. You could look at Molly and tell she was not the typical nanny. She came into their life. She had big blonde curls. She was wearing a bright coat with a fur collar, cowboy boots, and had pageant queen makeup on. Lynn said she just did not seem the nanny type. Jamie, this comes fresh to me after watching Mary Poppins, the musical that my kids performed in. And when I picture a nanny, I picture Mary Poppins, or I don't know, the father's old nanny. And I don't picture like a young college age beauty queen.
Do you picture Mrs. Doubtfire?
Yes.
Okay.
Precisely. Molly instantly did connect with 3-year-old Jack and 1-year-old Sarah. Jason's sister, Tracy, said that Molly was very gentle with the kids and that she was beginning to see the old Jason come back, meaning he wasn't sad all the time. He seemed to enjoy having her around.
And he needed help. That's why he hired her and called her. But of course, his sister saying it's not what he needed. It was potentially a temptation, a complication, I think, is what she foresaw. And, It didn't take long before that became a reality, and their relationship started to change into a romantic one. Jason wanted to take it slow for the sake of the kids, but Molly insisted that they get more serious. On Valentine's Day of 2010, and remember, he had hired her just 2 years earlier, at a bistro in Limerick, Jason asked Molly to be his wife. Molly was over the moon and couldn't wait to start planning a wedding that would take place back in the U.S. At the time of the wedding, Molly's family thought that all was well and all was wonderful, but Jason's family started seeing some red flags in their relationship. Tracy was talking with one of Molly's bridesmaids the night before the wedding and took note of how amazing it was that Molly had actually been friends with Jason's first wife, Mags. She had never been over to Ireland to see the kids, but when Mags died of cancer, she was able to step in and be a mother to her kids. It was almost like it was meant to be. Tracy told her that none of that was true. The family wondered if Jason really knew what he was getting into and was making a big mistake.
Yeah, some red flags for sure, right? Well, soon after the wedding, Jason was able to get a job and transfer with his packing company from Ireland to North Carolina, to a little suburb outside of Winston-Salem. It was called Walberg, North Carolina. Molly then got a job as a part-time swim instructor, but spent most of her time with the kids that she was the nanny. Well, I guess she's now their stepmother, but
Right.
She was the nanny for originally. That is Jack and Sarah. Apparently, Jason gave Molly $80,000 to buy furniture for the house and got her a BMW SUV. He also gave his father-in-law $49,000 as a contribution to his own wedding. What? Why?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally in America, and I haven't been married outside of America, but the wife's family ends up fitting the bill for a lot, but he was doing this to pitch in. Weddings, for some reason, people go all out and are crazy expensive. I mean, I spent less than a tenth of that contribution on my wedding, significantly less than that, actually. So, yeah, him contributing to that. And then the other items, $80,000 for furniture, that just seems like astronomical and ridiculous. But I think this just goes to show that Jason had money, Molly was spoiled.
Right. So Tracy, again, this is his sister, right? Kept digging and discovered more of Molly's lies and some erratic behavior. At one point, Molly had claimed to be an Olympic swimmer, a qualified Montessori teacher, and even a former foster mother. The foster mother part was really kind of what helped win her over as a candidate to be a nanny. Tracy also learned that Molly was bipolar and had allegedly had several miscarriages before she was with Jason. Tracy needs to win an award as like a detective because this is a lot of information that she's able to find. She even claimed that Molly was self-harming and drinking margaritas before driving the children to their appointments. So if this is true, this is a dangerous situation for the kids. Tracy also found out that Molly had been released from a psychiatric clinic just weeks before flying to Ireland to work for Jason back in 2008. Then there was another incident where Molly told neighbors one night that Sarah was her biological daughter, going so far as giving a lengthy description of her difficulty in labor. So this is not funny and I'm not trying to make a joke, but it makes me think of Michael Scott on The Office when he's dating a woman and he crops out pictures of their father and replaces them with pictures of himself. Like that is just psychopathic behavior.
It is. It's certainly, I mean, we touched on mental illness there, but that is not rational behavior for anybody in a relationship to lie about being now look, I'm an adoptive father. We've talked about that. I don't walk up to everybody and say, hey, these are my two birth kids and these are my adopted kids. I say, these are my kids. So if she's just going to say, these are my kids, because she's raising them as their stepmother, that's one thing. But to go far out of the way to tell those lies is very telling about kind of maybe her motivation.
Yeah, I get it. Like if I'm out with my kids and I have your kids and I meet somebody that I don't know super well, I might say, yeah, these are my kids.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to get into these are who I belong to. I don't want to do all that crap. But
as long as you pay for the food, you can call.
I want to have a lengthy
want.
conversation. I don't care to divulge that, but yeah, I get what you're saying. So something else odd happened. Tracy found out that Molly told the children that their dad had killed their first mom. So if this is true, this is awful.
Yeah.
For the kids to think that we have a stepmommy because our daddy killed our mommy. I mean, there is so much emotional baggage wrapped up in one statement if the kids really do believe that. Tracy later submitted to courts that Molly allegedly held the face of 7-year-old Jack under a running kitchen faucet as a form of punishment for splashing her with water. So if that is true, then she is proven to be unhinged, right? I mean, he was also allegedly punished for not calling Molly mom. According to a neighbor, Molly became enraged when Jack told neighbors that they were not Molly's biological children. Jason was not free of Molly's anger either. There was another family friend said a couple of days before Jason was killed, which, spoiler alert, that's what we're getting to. Jason left a social function early because Molly started fat shaming him in front of people. That is not good. Tracy said that was the last straw for Jason.
Yeah, not good at all. And as you may have noticed, a lot of what we've been sharing here are things that Tracy has found and come up with. Obviously, Tracy is Jason's sister, and she's looking to be an advocate for him. So a lot of these things are her opinions and point of view, but she brought receipts for a lot of this too. So this isn't all just hearsay. This isn't all just things that she's coming up with to defame Molly. But when things really take a turn is when Jason decides he's had enough and he's going back to Ireland. And when we get back from the break, we'll talk about what happened in Ireland and why we're here talking about this today. Whether it was the fat shaming or something else, it seems that Jason was ready to move on from his relationship with Molly, and he was going to move back to his home country of Ireland. He knew it would be difficult to leave Molly. I mean, breaking up a marriage is tough, but also because of the kids, because they really had a connection to Molly. However, it was a little legally easier for him because Molly had never officially adopted his kids as her own. On paper, she was their father's wife and not their legal mother. Now, Molly had been pushing to adopt the kids, but instead, Jason had applied for green cards for the children while retaining their Irish citizenship. Now, there are a lot of reasons that he may have been doing that. It may have had something to do with, just not wanting to commit them to Molly, even though he was committed to Molly, but that's neither here nor there. The fact is that she was not their mother. He said that a lot of it had to do with the fact that he did not want custody to be ever in jeopardy, and he said he couldn't risk that. So it turns out that Molly had spoken with attorneys about her rights with the kids back in 2013 and 2014. She was frustrated that she could not adopt them. So she went to see what her legal rights were as their stepmother who spent a lot of time caring for them. So it seems the custody battle started well before the relationship ended.
This all came to a head on August the 2nd, 2015. Thomas Martens, this was Molly's father, called 911 at 3 a.m. saying that his son-in-law Jason was badly injured. So this is a story, so buckle up. So in this 911 call, Tom tells the dispatcher that he had been spending the night at his daughter's home when he was awakened by a commotion upstairs. And that's when the 30-year-old FBI veteran grabbed a Little League baseball bat. It was an aluminum baseball bat, which he had purchased as a gift for the kids. And then he ran upstairs to his daughter's bedroom. Tom said that Molly and Jason were physically fighting, so he intervened, and he may have killed Jason. First responders arrived at the house and found Jason unresponsive with massive head injuries that would later prove to be fatal. Both Tom and Molly gave statements to the officers indicating that Jason's death was a result of a domestic disturbance. Both Tom and Molly were interviewed for a few hours after Jason's death. So Tom claimed that he grabbed the baseball bat, ran upstairs, where he saw Jason strangling Molly in their dark bedroom. Tom said that Jason was strangling her and saying, "I'm going to kill her, I'm going to kill her," like repeating that phrase over and over. Then, allegedly, the two men struggled on the floor. And while they were on the floor, allegedly, that's when Molly hit Jason over the head with a concrete paving stone. This is basically a brick. And I know if you're like me, you're thinking, why was there a brick in the bedroom?
Yep. My first thought.
Yeah, apparently the kids had plans to paint that brick for some reason, and it was just in the room allegedly because of that, unpainted. Then Tom, so after he was hit with the paving stone, then Tom continued to beat Jason with the baseball bat.
And you can find audio of this 911 call out there, and Tom's very calm in how he talks about it. He says, "I was protecting my daughter. They were fighting. I intervened. I may have killed him." And he's just matter of fact about it. I don't want to gloss over the fact that he was an FBI veteran. So he was trained in hand-to-hand combat to some degree, just being a special agent. So,
well, and he was very educated. I mean, I'll let you discuss more of that too.
Yeah, he had a law degree from Emory University, and he repeatedly, when he talked to officers, emphasized his state of mind while being interviewed, possibly due to his legal knowledge that would help if a successful self-defense plea were to become necessary, and he had to convince a jury that he and Molly had feared for their lives. So he continued to state, "In my state of mind, I was defending my daughter. In my state of mind, her life was at risk. My life was at risk." In her interview, Molly admitted to police that she attempted to hit Jason over the head with a brick during the incident. She also told investigators that there was a history of domestic violence in their marriage, but when she sought medical assistance, she says that she had always lied about how she got her injuries. Molly also claimed that Jason was a heavy drinker, and that day when he attacked her, he was actually very drunk. Now, there are some pieces to go on there. As it turns out, there is no evidence for abuse in their relationship beforehand. Even looking at her hospital visits, there seems to be no track record for that. There are other people who will say that he did have some anger issues. She did have some audio of him yelling. So not painting him as the perfect husband in this situation, and whether or not they were arguing at the time is kind of, I don't know, one of the cruxes of this conversation.
Yeah, and it's important that investigators know all of this, but also like to really investigate the scene just so they can put everything together. And if it matches their story, then I think they may have an argument for self-defense. But let's talk about the scene. So the scene did not totally match what Tom and Molly were describing. For starters, Jason's autopsy could not determine exactly how many times Jason was struck, because so many of them overlapped. I hate to be gruesome, but basically that means he was hit in the head so many times with a baseball bat, they couldn't determine how many times he was hit because multiple hits were in the same location or just slightly overlapped. He was beaten so severely that pieces of his skull fell out during his autopsy. And really, I mean, they fell out before the autopsy.
Right.
His brains were literally beat out. And I know that's an awful thing to say. But, they described that Tom and Jason got in a fight. They were struggling on the floor, but Molly nor Tom had any injuries, no physical injuries that could be documented. Now, Molly's voice was hoarse, and officers said that she was rubbing her neck a lot back and forth. Getting back to the autopsy, I think it's important to note that Jason also showed trace amounts of trazodone in his bloodstream. Well, that is a prescription drug, and he was never prescribed trazodone, but Molly had been issued a prescription for it and filled it 3 days before Jason's death. Along with that, Jason's toxicology report showed a blood alcohol level of 0.02. The legal limit is 0.08, so he was not drunk at all. And that definitely goes against what Molly had claimed.
And he was a big guy. So even with his blood alcohol content, he had drank some, but especially with as big as he was, it didn't seem like it should have had any impact on his mood, on his impairment, anything like that. But trazodone is also, it's a antidepressant, but it's also used to treat insomnia. So I wouldn't use the word tranquilizer, but it will make you sleepy and less responsive. And after being released by police, Molly allegedly went out and spent $5,500 on having the house industrial cleaned of all traces of blood. I can't for the life of me think of why the house was allowed to be cleaned at this time. It's obviously, as a homeowner, if this happened, I don't want evidence of what happened in my house. Just because I don't want to relive it and see it. It's got to be a painful moment, even if it's self-defense. It's a memory you don't want, but that so much evidence has to be gathered.
Yeah, I was to put myself, to play devil's advocate, I guess. If I don't have the resources to pay somebody $5,000 to clean my house that thoroughly, if something brutal did happen in my home, that even if I'm thinking in my mind, I'm not even involved in it, right? Like if an attacker comes in, hurts somebody, there's no way I'm going to be able to physically do that myself.
Right.
But I mean, I would think I would have friends that would volunteer to help, or at least volunteer to help pay somebody I don't know, a few $100,
right,
but not 5,000. That tells you this is a deep industrial clean.
And as fast as it happened. I mean, I would think that it would be roped off. It would be a crime scene for weeks, and you just have to find somewhere else to stay.
You would think the police would have to say, okay, it is clear for you to do whatever you need.
There's also documentation of Molly trying to have Jason's body cremated before his family arrived from Ireland, but that was not allowed to happen because authorities did put a stop to that. Then she only allowed Jason's family access to his remains after they signed a legal agreement to pay the full costs of his funeral and having his body moved back to Ireland, which has to be a very complicated process that I never hope to encounter myself. Sarah later described the memorial service for her father as bizarre. Again, Sarah, she's still a little girl at this time. The family acted like nothing had happened. Like they were having a barbecue by the pool. She said that Molly and her dad and others around acted like it was, I don't know, a party, which to some degree, people say that it should be a celebration of life, but that wasn't the vibe that Jason's family had. Tracy alleged that Molly's family had hired off-duty police officers to try to keep his family away from the memorial service. So it's like they were having a celebration and doing everything they could to keep them away.
Yeah, so the day Jason was killed, his children were interviewed by the North Carolina Union County Department of Social Services about their parents' relationships. Sarah told the interviewer that her dad is angry on a regular basis. She described a time where her dad pulled Molly's hair and then also smacked Molly in the face. Jack claimed that his dad had been physically that he had physically assaulted Molly, and that his dad gets mad at his mom for no good reason. So it sounds to some people, and maybe if I had more context, maybe even myself, that the children appeared to have been coached. 10-year-old Jack used words like physically and verbally abused his mom, and that's not something that a 10-year-old would normally say.
Nope.
8-year-old Sarah said that her mom told her that her dad was not a very good dad. So it wasn't that Sarah said he's not a very good dad. It was that mom said my dad is not a very good dad. Jason had a will from 2007. And in that will, he names Tracy and her husband, so his sister and brother-in-law, as the legal guardians of Jack and Sarah should anything ever happen to him. Now, he never changed that will after he married Molly. Man, I would love to have an attorney present, because you would think that even if he didn't legally change the will, that just now having a stepmom, that would kind of circumvent what was in the will, but apparently it didn't. So a few days after Jason had died, Molly filed for custody of the children. But by then, Tracy had arrived in the U.S., and she also filed a legal challenge against Molly's petition. So authorities ruled in favor of Tracy because of the will, and she promptly took the children to Ireland, where they had a service for Jason and laid him to rest next to his first wife. The children also started intensive therapy after they returned to Ireland. In the months following their return, Tracy did not allow Molly to have contact with the children, but she reportedly tried to contact them by posting photos and messages on social media, hoping that someone would pass those messages to the kids. That's not cool.
Yeah, it's such a tough situation for everybody involved. And if you're looking at this objectively to say it was in the will, and the will, I think, is a legal document till it's not, right? So I don't know, like my wife and I have documents with an attorney that what will happen to our stuff and our kids if something were to happen to us. And I think unless we change it, it doesn't change. So I think the will would stay even after a marriage.
Yeah. And I guess there are things that attorneys can do, like preemptively, that would the circumstance would arise that it would change things. Like the attorney could have put language in like this could be null and void if Jason remarries, and then custody would go to the new wife. Like my attorney had some foresight to put in my will, like any biological children or adopted children of me and my wife. Well, at the time we only had a couple of kids. So, but she made it to where even if we had kids in the future or adopted kids, we wouldn't need to go back and do the legal process over again.
Is this you telling us you're having more kids? Is this the official announcement?
It is not.
Okay.
But I could, and they would be in the will, even though they weren't there when the will was created.
And also, again, trying to be objective, from Molly's perspective, if this did occur and her father ended up killing her husband in self-defense or defense of her, she has this connection with the kids and she wants them to grow up having that connection. You and I both know that all the research says growing up in a home with your birth family is, which Molly's not their birth family, but she's really as close as they have living at that point. So it's a bad situation for everybody, especially the kids.
Yeah. I mean, if in Kentucky, if this happened, I mean, you would have to look at, okay, there's this will, but he's been married since the creation of the will. The kids have a relationship with Molly. So, I mean, it would be logical to keep the kids with Molly.
Yep.
But yeah, I guess that will is legal and binding, even if they're married.
But as you know, across state lines, that gets messy. Across country lines, that has to get super messy too. And it gets even messier on January 5th of 2016 when Molly and Tom were arrested and charged with second-degree murder and voluntary manslaughter. They were ordered to hand over their passports and not to attempt to contact Jason's children over in Ireland. They were released on $200,000 bail each while they awaited trial. While they prepared for trial, Jack started telling his aunt some of the information that he had told police before in his interview about things that he saw and things that Mom said were not necessarily true. He had spoken with his therapist about it, and then over Skype, he recanted his previous statements to authorities, saying that he had been told to say these things by his mom, who was Molly. He said he never saw his dad hurt his mom. Again, he said he had saw them fighting and his dad had a temper, but now he's saying he never actually saw that Molly told him to say it. Looking at this, he's been living with Tracy. Did Tracy tell him to recant, or is this a legitimate child realizing he told a lie and wants to fix it?
Yeah.
In July of 2016, Molly and Tom's legal team filed a motion to exclude Jack's rebuttal interview from evidence, claiming that it was hearsay and unreliable. During pre-trial hearings in 2017, a judge determined that none of the children's interviews, including the ones taken the day of Jason's alleged murder, would be admissible in court. So they're completely taking the kids' voices at this point out of it, which I get, but they're also the only other two people that were in the house.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Maybe it is the best way to be completely objective and lean on science. If you take that out, I'm not sure. On July 25th, 2017, the trial began with the prosecution saying that Jason planned to leave Molly and take the kids back to Ireland. And Molly did not want to lose the children who she considered her own. So the fact that he had never let her adopt the children and this on top of that led to rising tensions in the home. The prosecution pointed out that self-defense made little to no sense because the autopsy showed that Jason was hit at least a dozen times and his skull was completely crushed, and that just one or two blows would have incapacitated him enough to let them get away if they really were fighting for their lives. Prosecutors also reminded the jury that Molly and Tom were physically unharmed in this fight for their lives. And, I think it is logical to assume that if you were in a fight for your life, you'd have some kind of physical marks of a fight.
Some kind of defensive wounds, scratches, or that there would have been scratches on Jason as Molly was trying to fight him off. And the paramedics testified, and they actually used the word overkill when they saw what had been done to Jason, saying that it did not look simply like self-defense. So this is, things are not looking good for Molly and Tom with how much actually happened, having no physical harm to themselves. And then all the other, again, the jury doesn't know these things yet, but a lot of the other lies that she had been caught in by Tracy. The prosecution called Jason's next door neighbor, David Fritz, to testify. David said the day before Jason died, he mowed the lawn, and then the two sat down to have a couple beers together around 3:30 p.m. Their wives would join them about an hour later, and they all continued sitting around, drinking and talking until about 8 o'clock, and that's when Molly's parents arrived for a surprise weekend visit. According to David, Jason had about 7 beers, and he was in a pretty good mood. He didn't seem to be drunk, and he was in control of his own self when they parted ways. They also called the 911 dispatcher who took Tom's call that night. They played the 911 call for the jury, and then the dispatcher claimed that Tom seemed, quote unquote, surprisingly calm throughout this 14-minute conversation, and it really sounded like me calling to order a pizza. So it seemed pretty straightforward and calm. The dispatcher also said that even though he had allegedly performed over 400 chest compressions while Molly shouted the count, he did not sound out of breath or overexerted at all. So Tom was claiming they had tried to save his life, but it sounded like he was just sitting perfectly calm and well composed.
I know this guy was former FBI agent, so maybe he's in better shape than I am, but if I was just in a fight for my life and then immediately after called 911 and did over 400 chest compressions, you're going to notice a difference in my breathing. Okay.
You said 3 different things there: fighting for your life, calling 911, and chest compressions. Any one of those, if I'm in a situation I have to call 911, I'm frantic.
Your adrenaline is kicking in for sure.
Yeah.
Now, again, he's trained by the FBI, so maybe he's going to be more calm than us. But I will tell you this, when I was in my prime, I was in my mid-20s, I was working out every single day. I had to perform CPR on a woman for around 15 minutes, and I was trading in and out with a guy. Had I been there by myself, I would not have been able to do 15 minutes by myself.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, to do proper CPR is not easy. You have to compress the chest hard enough to get their heart to beat blood for them. So, yeah, I think this is a very, very valid argument to kind of make you think a little bit. So, some other folks that were called to the stand, one of them was the medical examiner's office, and they came and testified that they had performed a postmortem exam on Jason, And he said that Jason's skull was so badly shattered that he could not precisely say how many times that he had been struck in the head, but only that he could give an estimate of around 12 blows to the head. He said evidence suggested at least 8 of those blows would have been sufficient to have rendered Jason unconscious. And I think it's important to note that would have been like 8 of the hits. If they happened individually, each one of those would have been enough to make him go unconscious. It wasn't that, okay, after 8 hits, then he was, no, that's not what they're saying. He also said that out of those, they have identified 4 that if each one of them had happened individually, they would have been enough to have killed him. So really, if you look at it, at least one hit of the baseball bat could have been enough to knock him unconscious. Another one was enough to kill him, but he was hit at least 12 times. The autopsy also revealed that he had suffered blunt force trauma to his torso and arms. When they showed photos of Jason's head to the jury, proceedings had to be paused because one juror became so physically ill that they had to leave the room. I mean, this was very, very gruesome. They also called paramedics to the stand that responded to that scene that night, and they testified that they arrived to the scene 10 minutes after Tom made the call, and they moved Jason to the ambulance for life-saving treatment. But however, while they were working on him, they noticed that he was remarkably cold. So they checked his body temperature, and it was much lower than what would have been expected. I mean, if this series of events happened, back to back, then we're talking about 20 minutes at most that he would have been dead. But they said he had been dead much longer than the 10 minutes since the call had came in.
The scene, when the examiner got there, he told the court that he arrived and he asked if he could take photos of Molly's neck where she had allegedly been strangled. That way he could see if there were even just red marks or hand marks. He said he took the photos, and the examiner said that when investigating them, he could not find any evidence of injuries to her neck. He did have to tell Molly to stop rubbing her neck while he took the photos, which is an inference that she was trying to make them red on her own for the photos. Again, that seems to be what he's implying here, not what I'm saying. Another officer added that while he was in the patrol car, she continued rubbing her neck in a scrubbing motion, not a my neck's sore kind of way, but trying to do something with her skin. They said she was making crying noises, but there were no tears. Then they had a blood spatter analyst come and said the first few blows could have happened while Jason was in the bed because blood spatters were found inside the quilt and on the mattress. So if you recall, they said that he was on his feet with Molly strangling her when engaged by Tom, and he and Tom fell to the floor before he was hit by the stone and then subsequently the bat. So there should have been no evidence of blood spatter under the quilt or on the mattress if that was truly what happened. He also testified that blood spatters on the wall showed that Jason was hit several times as he was falling down to the floor. And as I picture that, I picture he gets hit and you kind of lean over, you get hit, you go down to your knees, you get hit, like a progressive going to the ground. Then they called a former co-worker of Tom to the stand, and she said that just before their wedding, Joanne Lowry said that Tom had expressed dislike for Jason and his friends and wasn't excited about Molly getting married to him. In another conversation 2 months before Jason died, this co-worker said that Tom had told her, that son-in-law, I hate him. Now, of course, hating somebody doesn't mean you killed him, but this is starting to be a lot of evidence against them, John.
So when it was the defense's turn, they laid out their version of events. So they said that things went downhill that night when Sarah woke up from a nightmare, and then Molly had to go in and check on her. So allegedly this enraged Jason because he had been woken up, and then that's when a fight started between he and Molly. Molly claimed this was not uncommon. Jason was allegedly frequently violent and abusive. They said that Jason was choking her when her father arrived at the scene in their bedroom. So Molly claims that her father fell and Jason went after him. And that's when she grabbed a brick that was on her nightstand and hit him on the head. So that's when Tom grabbed the bat and continued to hit Jason to save his daughter. Then Tom took the stand in his own defense, and he asserted that he thought his daughter was going to die and admitted his dislike for his son-in-law. Under cross-examination, Tom admitted he told his daughter to ask for a divorce because he didn't think he was a good enough man for his daughter. He also confessed he had never physically witnessed any abuse involving Jason and Molly before the night of the incident, and Molly chose not to take the stand.
I imagine Tom's history in law enforcement just gave him confidence that he could get up there and not be rattled by cross-examination. On August 9th, 2017, after just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found both Tom and Molly Martens guilty of the second-degree murder of Jason Corbett. Both were sentenced to a minimum of 20 years and a maximum of 25 years in prison. Media interviews with jurors said that none of them believed that Jason had attacked Molly at all that night. And the sheer number of blows to the victim, they felt completely obliterated the self-defense argument. One juror noted that Molly would cry when the children were discussed, but not when they talked about Jason. So they believed that maybe she wasn't sad that Jason was gone, but she did have a genuine connection to the kids. So, the trial's wrapped up, and that's the end of the story, right, John?
Of course not. So there's always going to be appeals, right? 4 years later, on March 12, 2021, the North Carolina Supreme Court ruled that Molly and Tom must be granted a new trial for the murder of Jason on the grounds that the statements that were made by the children were wrongly excluded from being used by the defense attorneys during their 2017 trial. In response, Jack and Sarah, who were much older at this point, said that they would testify against Molly and Tom in case their previous statements would be used in court to try to defend Molly and Tom. They didn't want their original statements to be used in that manner, so they said they would testify and say the exact opposite of what their original statements were. 2 years later, on October 30th, 2023, Molly and Tom both accepted plea deals, and this was for the charges of Class D manslaughter in return for the district attorneys to drop murder charges against them. This kind of crazy in my mind because I think that they could go to trial for murder. Molly pled no contest and Tom pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter. During both sentencing hearings, Jack and Sarah were there and they gave impact statements. Jack was 19 years old and urged the judge not to be fooled by Molly. He said that she was a monster who abused him and weaponized his earlier statements in an effort to get away with murdering his father.
Before we get to this result, I want to say that I do think it was a mistake to exclude their statements. I think that was important, or else the police wouldn't have sought it out. And it's very common for kids that young to talk and give statements about what they've seen in the home. Now, I also think the recantation should have been allowed, but to allow none of it, I almost feel like the judge was setting himself up for a mistrial or an appeal. Regardless, Sarah described that she had to go through years and years of therapy because her statements as a child were so twisted that she had trouble figuring out what was real because she had been manipulated to try and help Molly and Tom escape punishment. She also said that Molly showed no remorse for killing her father, that Molly removed her wedding ring almost immediately and told her to stop crying and get over it just a few days after her dad died. That's not something you say ever, let alone a few days after. As the children read out their statements, Molly sobbed loudly and laid her face down on the table. Both children urged the judge to give Molly and Tom the maximum sentence of 25 years for the death of their father, even though this was for manslaughter and not second-degree murder. To this day, Molly believes the children have been brainwashed by Jason's family and are being used as tools of evil to get revenge on her for her own self-defense. On November 9th, in 2023, Molly and Tom were each sentenced to 51 and 74 months in prison, respectively. That is 4 years, 3 months, and then 6 years, 2 months.
For murdering someone.
Because of the time served, they would each only serve 7 or 8 months in prison before they were eligible for parole. So their 20-year sentences cut down.
Not even parole, just release, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. Tracy, again, Jason's sister, always believed that the motive for her brother's death that night was that Molly found out Jason was planning on taking the kids back to Ireland. And she believes that Molly killed her brother in a staged domestic incident to gain custody of the children. Jason had a longtime friend named Lynn, and they said, I think Jason became surplus to her requirements. She didn't need him anymore. She just wanted the children. She was playing the long game, and that was telling people that she had been in an abusive relationship and that she would have a case to get the children back from him if that was true. So, again, just using Jason as a pawn to get the kids, get the money, and then get out.
Just about a year ago, on June 6th of 2024, Molly and Tom were released from prison after completing their sentences for voluntary manslaughter. Both had 1 year of prison release supervision that had to take place in Tennessee. In response to their release from prison, former sheriff said that the two got off with a slap on the wrist. He also said he believed Tom simply spent enough money on appeals until the courts got worn down and accepted their last appeal and plea deal. Today, Jack and Sarah live in Ireland. They were raised by their aunt and uncle. They had changed their last names to Corbett Lynch, and Molly is legally prohibited from ever contacting them, which I think is they're adults now. That's got to be difficult to enforce over borders, but it is what it is. In interviews, Molly still refers to them as her children. And you can see interviews from all these people in the documentary mentioned at the top of the episode. But what a wild story, John, of a marriage that was kind of almost built on lies and then ends in violence and stories that don't add up.
Yeah. I mean, is there any part of you that feels like this was self-defense, or do you feel this was all staged and it's very cut and dry?
I'm absolutely with the jury that self-defense does not include that many blows to the head with a baseball bat.
Yeah, completely
like
agree.
that does it for me. And I fully get that if you're defending yourself, you may go too far to make sure they're not getting up, but this was about 3 steps further than that.
Yep. For sure, yeah.
You feel the same way?
Oh, yeah, completely.
Yeah.
I don't believe any of this, and I think it just sucks. I mean, Jason, he lost potentially the love of his life and then fell for this young, attractive nanny, which resulted in his untimely death and just trauma after trauma for his young kids.
And Tom and Molly trying to say that his first wife's death was under suspicious circumstances to fuel their defense is pretty gross.
For sure. And just all around awful.
Would encourage people, even if you've listened to this, you feel like you have all the details, go watch that documentary and get the interviews. It's fascinating to hear from the people involved, and let us know if that changes your mind or if you think we're off either way. So,
yep, guys, we appreciate you. Again, if you want more content and you've already listened to everything available on our main feed, go check out Patreon, patreon.com. You can sign up there for as little as $3 a month to get all of our past bonus episodes.
Yep, guys, we really appreciate you so much. Hope you enjoyed this case, and we'll be back with another one soon.
Until next crime, this has been True Crimecast.
You've listened to True Crimecast, distributed by Stoveleg Media. Check out stoveleg.com to find out more about your hosts and to find other podcasts to listen to. Stoveleg Media, igniting conversation.